name is Martha. This is Dave. He's one of the we're the co-chairs of Quincy Tree Alliance, current co-chairs. And we also have Heather over here with the baby, and she has brought fig cuttings for you if you would like some to plant. And we have Erin over here, and she takes care of all our social media things and stuff like that. Welcome, come on in. Plenty of space. So, but thank you very much to Thomas Crane Public Library for hosting us and for QATV for doing this for us too. We are a citizens group, Quincy Tree Alliance, and we just like trees and we want to protect them and collaborate with the city and take care of them and plant them and do whatever we can for the city of Quincy. If you're not on our mailing list, our email list, we send out about 2 emails a month, and we'd love to have you be on the list so you can know what we're up to. We generally meet by Zoom on the third Sunday at 6 p.m. Sometimes we change it depending on who can be there, and we will let you know that. We focus on trees and education. We do nature walks. Dave has done quite a few for us. We do talks. Thank you to the panelists ahead of time, especially with all the winter things and storms that have been happening. And we do plantings. And last spring we planted 2 serviceberry trees at Safford Park. And then we had high school kids were there, and then they watered them all summer long, and they're doing great so far. I hope the rabbits haven't gotten them. But and we're looking into planning again this spring. We don't have a site yet. We're looking at lots of different places around, maybe Lincoln Hancock School, maybe something over by the Armory, maybe some other park. If you have any ideas, let us know, because we will be doing another planting and how to plant a tree kind of thing. Let's see. And thank you to our panelists. And we've got that one up here. So we have Mike Casanelli. He's project manager for Quincy Department of Natural Resources. We then will hear from Ben Pond, who is an arborist with the city of Quincy. And we have Hannah Carlson, and she is our other current board member and a landscape architect. So the format for the evening is going to be 3 speakers, and then we want to have time for questions. So hold your questions till the end, and they'll be happy to try to answer as much as they can. Mike is going to start out.
We get show and tell.
Yes, yes. So Mike's going to start out like, where do we plant things? How do we decide what to plant? What are the trees? What do we do with them? And Ben is then going to take over and show you what he finds when he's out being an arborist there, and he brought a lot of things to show you. And then Hannah is going to end it up by giving you some ideas of what you might want to plant in your own garden. So, Mike, thank you.
Thank you. Hello, everybody. See some familiar faces here. So my name is Mike Casanelli. I am the project manager and forester with the City of Quincy Department of Natural Resources. I started in 2019. My roles and responsibilities mostly include parks and trees. So project management from start to finish, planning, procurement, playground constructions, improvements, and park developments and improvements as well, which is really cool to be, have grown up in this city and have seen the improvements over 30 years. It's really cool, like night and day, honestly. It's a city that we are, so involved with, and consolidated insurance is another aspect of it, which is I oversee motor vehicle accidents with trees, and I also deal with tree planting. And at one point I was the active tree warden for about 6 months, and I also oversee stump grant. So what is a city tree? Well, city tree is anything on sidewalks, parks and playgrounds, schoolyards, cemeteries, traffic islands, and open spaces. So really anything that's on city property is a city tree. So I do want to go over the importance of trees because I know that everyone here really already knows the importance of trees, but I always like to touch base in case there's some new folks here. There's endless benefits really. Increasing property values, extends the life of impervious materials like cement and asphalt and shading, lowering energy costs. It's a huge aspect of it. You know, they have leaves and block the sun, provide shade during the summer, and losing it in the winter allows the sunlight to come through. It's honestly a perfect way for energy saving. Also, it should be seen as not only aesthetics and beautification, but it does have infrastructure values, stormwater mitigation, pollution mitigation, sequestering carbon, improving air quality, and reducing the urban heat index. So the goals of my department, especially in the forestry department, is increasing the canopy throughout the city. You want to maintain an urban forest that thrives. So to do that, we have to proactively plan and research as things are always developing, as it's a living thing. Maximizing environmental return on investment is a way to make it more resilient infrastructure. And targeting heat vulnerable neighborhoods for a lot of impacts over the years. You'll see with Emerald Ash Borer that we'll talk about in a little bit that we have to work around. We're always kind of fighting the environment. The environment usually always wins. So tree planting should be seen as a long-term asset. What we're planting now is really for the future. Someone once said you might plant a tree but never get to enjoy the shade of it. So it's a plan for the future. A lot of things with tree planting is the right tree in the right place, the proper species and location will minimize future removals, future pruning, or minimize future removals, minimize future pruning. So planned planting reduces future removals. And maintenance protects investment, which is what Ben is the best at. So tree planting as a long-term asset. It's kind of a full slide, but right tree in the right place was the gist of the whole slide. So the tree planting strategy. How do I come up with areas that I want to plant trees at? It's not just driving down the street. I get requests from residents. That is one of my favorite things because I know those residents love trees. And it's a way that I can provide public service in that way. With the city tree inventory, I'm able to identify low canopy covered streets. Working with DPW as they construct new streets, some things have to be removed, or and I have to come up with a planting plan for that street. It's one of the parts of the infrastructure. Another area that we look at is state and federal grants. So they have very particular zones usually that we have to plant and specifications that we have to follow. And that's an area that changes the geographic range of where I can plant. Of course, replacing trees that have to be removed is another aspect. I try to get on top of that as much as possible. And I'll get into a little bit of why I can't always plant right exactly where the old tree was. I get that request sometimes. One of the things that we've seen growing up in West Quincy, we have a lot of ash trees. Well, with the recent Emerald Ash Borer, has done some devastation, just like in the past with the Dutch elm disease, and possibly the beaches are coming around as well. So it's something we always have to anticipate and plan for, and plant, either resistant trees. Nothing is really ever foolproof with the environment, as we're always kind of battling, pest diseases and vectors like that. So on to the next. So tree planting site assessments. One of my favorite parts of the job, to be honest, because it's never cut and dry for the most part. There's a lot of things to take in. It might be as simple as, well, I'm putting a tree on the sidewalk. Well, I take a lot of things into consideration. Overhead, underground utility wires. That's the last thing I ever want to impede is service or create a future problem. People will have other trees in their yards, gardens. Buildings could be close to the sidewalk, so I have to account for that. And there's a lot of species that I have to look at. So whether it's X-current growth and D-current growth, I have to put smaller trees under the utility wires that grow only about 20 feet or so tall, 25 feet, because we have utility, and we all have seen kind of what can happen if the wrong tree is planted in the wrong site. We have a great strategy now with the Department of Natural Resources where we have been, even working with DCR on putting the right trees in the right place so that we don't have future issues and have to worry about, poor pruning from utility companies, or whether it's storms and ripping wires. So there's a very proactive plan of what we put and where. I do like to take account, what people have in their yard. If they have a tree in their private property, I try not to also, I try to work around it too. So I try to be very strategic. Gardens are a big thing. So I look at both public, private, everything around it, utility poles, stop signs, fire hydrants. I have to be very aware of what's going to happen for the future because I have to look at it as it's going to be a mature tree, not exactly the 2-inch caliper tree that it is right now. Another thing is soil conditions. So sunlight, salinity, some of these areas that we're planting are very high traffic areas where it's pollution, it could be road salt, it could be ocean salt, salt spray. So I have to work with a species that's going to thrive in that location. So it's not exactly one size fits all when it comes to tree planting. The other things to consider is the soil, compacted soil, and I'll get a little bit into that in the future slides. But I'm not taking up too much time.
You're doing fine. Yeah, you're good.
Okay. Yes, this goes back to right tree in the right place. You kind of see what happens. This is actually a good pruning situation. It has been deep, but not. It's been reduced as well. Right down here is kind of the idea. So they have National Grid has a radius that they have to clear those wires. It's usually about 10 feet down, about 12 feet out on each side. So by putting the right tree on the right side, I can prevent these issues in the future. Other factors, soil volume, nutrients, pollution. So we don't have a lot of recycling of nutrients in an urban environment as much. You will see it in parks and cemeteries and private properties a lot more, but it's something that we also have to look at very urban tolerant plants. I do like to try to go around and give it some organic fertilizer when I can, or a year or two after, or 2 years after initial planting. I might even do some pruning of myself as well. While street trees may only live a fraction of their potential lifespan, trees in better planned urban settings or parks can live much longer. So I have a much wider range of species that I can plant in parks and cemeteries and open spaces than I can on streets. It has to do with the size of the sidewalk, the proximity to certain things, buildings, power lines, and then it also deals with food production. We don't want to be putting something that's going to be a mess, that's going to rip up the sidewalks, oaks, bald cypress. There's very few areas that you can go in that won't get wires in their planting system. It can create traffic hazards, and that's something I also take into account. Tree selection and planting, proactive healthcare are essential to extend the life of trees in the environment. Sorry. This is actually one of my favorite trees I planted. It is, I believe it's on Cliff Street or White Street. It is a Happy Days sweet gum tree. Kind of looks like a candy corn. It's a cultivar, so it doesn't have the sweet gum pods. So you've seen sweet gum pods, they're a little spiky. They're not, harmful, but this variety is podless. So along with tree planting, there's about 20 species I look at every year. The reason for that is because there's a 30-20 rule, 30-20-10 rule. So 30% of family, 20% of genus, and 10% of species. You really don't want, that's the goal. You don't want to have a wide, like if everything was ash trees, the reason for that is biodiversity, because if you have a lot of one variety and we have a pest or disease that comes around, it can wipe out the whole street. So the idea when I'm planting a street, I try to put multiple types of varieties in the street and not do a single strand monoculture. I'm always looking at the invasive species list and working with other colleagues and state partners to any research and grants and improvements that we can do. I always thought 2-inch caliber trees were the best initial impact, perfect for the sidewalk trees, where they don't need structural pruning, as much structural pruning. They have a good start, as you can see, right there. This is I believe this is at Forbesville Park, it looks like, that picture.
It's like that in there.
Awesome. That is an American sweet gum tree actually in that picture, so that one does produce pods. You see it's a little different color, it's more purple. What do I put in the contract for the specification? I'm always looking at trying to improve things. So mycorrhiza is a really important amendment to put in the soil with trees. There's a symbiotic relationship with fungus and trees. So the fungus essentially gives phosphorus, unlocks the phosphorus from the soil, gives it to the tree gives it some sugars back. So it's a perfect situation to be in. Biochar, there's some new research that biochar mixed with some compost has been great improvement. It helps with longevity, sequester carbon. I've seen really, been testing for 2 years now, and I've seen some great improvements and not as many replacement trees. Along with the other thing that's always put in the soil is complete organic fertilizer. I like organics, I'm not a synthetic fertilizer person. Each project site involves soil remediation, so we remove 48 square feet of soil at each site that we do. It's about 1.7, 1.8 cubic feet of soil that we remove at the planting site, because we usually expect it to be somewhat contaminated, not salt, pollution. We want to give it a better start. So that's the best that we can do. So we give it a little extra boost by replacing that soil high in organic matter, because it's usually depleted. So when I say it's contaminated, it's usually depleted of nutrients. So we try to give it the best start that we can. Each tree is staked, watered, and mulched. The stakes come off after the roots are established, typically about 1 year. It depends. After a storm like this, we might have to keep them a little longer because they got pushed around a little bit with the snow and the wind. And I follow up with the contractors to make sure that everything is straightened, watered, and taken care of at each site. Each tree is under warranty for 2 years. So if anything happens, I go back to the contractor and it is replaced for free. Each tree is contracted from April to, it's the first growing season, from April to November to be watered. One of the coolest parts of my job too is products, park projects. So we recently did, the picture you're seeing is Pond Street. It was a heritage tree project that the city has conducted. And we have, as part of it, and we have planted 1,591 caliber inches of trees. So that's very impressive for the state. 300 street trees, 92 parks and cemeteries, and I always had to throw in the Arbor Day because I love helping with education. So, having the trees continue, hopefully I won't take up too much time.
You're doing great.
Common issues I'm seeing with, common issues I see with trees is, you never know what's under the ground until you dig it, the first part. We dig safe does a good job, but it's always unforeseeable things, ledge, stone. Then we have surface roots from old stumps, so that's going back to, when the stump is ground, we only go about 8 inches down. So we have to allow that time for it to decay. We can't always put a tree right back on the same spot. We can shift it around. It's usually a little bit of play with the excavator. And then the other thing we always do when we don't have green strips, as you see in this photo, is we'll put tree pits in. So it's a little bit of an extra expense, but it's important because we need to have a green canopy, and some sidewalks are cement, so we have to cut a little section up. It's usually about 8 feet by 3 feet, and that gives enough room for the roots to grow and for the tree to thrive. So we've expanded it over the past couple of years. So common issues, probably the most common issue we see with tree planting is watering. So that's why it's so important that it gets an extra 15 gallons of water each week that I ask for watering reports from the contractors. I made little cards up because even during drought seasons, sometimes it's not enough, so I try to reach out to residents, see what else they can do to help. Volcano washing is a lot of people see that on residential, commercial properties. If you ever see it on the city strip, please let me know. It's bad because what it's going to allow is the bacteria and fungus to kind of eat at the base of the tree, and girdling roots to come around, which Ben will talk about in a little bit, so I'm not going to get into it. Cleaning trees, so we have to go restake, re-straighten. It's very important that we have a straight 90-degree tree. They will try to bend with the light, but if it's blown over by the wind too much, it could naturally grow that way. Other issues is because we're in a busy city, there's accidents that happen. So it's another thing I have to deal with Bartlett is come up with, identify what's wrong with the tree. Sometimes it's just bark tracing, doesn't essentially need to be removed. Girdling is another problem we have, usually in just park settings. Especially Pine Hill Cemetery, what we've seen in the past, we've put some tree protection up, but deer have come up and scraped off their antlers pretty well in a couple of trees. So it's just something that we have to be cognizant of when we're planting. Street trees versus park trees. Well, we can put a lot more in the parks than we can on the streets. So having X-current growth is really good for the street trees. Not so much. It's really good for the street trees. D-current growth is okay, but to an extent. So like dogwoods, like low branching trees, will have we could have some issues with because they grow they branch up so low. It would be tough to park in the street if you had a dogwood like that. Other things that we have to look at are, willows. Certain trees have very invasive roots, so they can get in the pipes, they can bust up sidewalks. So that's another factor that comes into play. You might see one in the park, but you won't see it on the street. And how can we help Quincy's Forest? A big thing is educating and talking about it and building up as a community because it's something that we all care about. Garden clubs, Quincy Tree Alliance, Natural Resources, TCR, there's a lot of cool community out there and government agencies that really want to work together because we all have the same common goal. This picture actually is in Breck, in Howes Neck with the Acton House School. I like to do an Arbor Day tree planting Ryan Vac's been with me over at Burns High School before, so we like to try to do that every Arbor Day. We hand out little saplings, little plugs for the kids to go home and plant at their own house, and we teach them how to plant a tree and what to look for. It's really fun time, to be honest. And then please request a street tree to put on your sidewalk if you're interested. And with that, I'll give it off to Ben.
My name is Ben Pond. I'm an arborist with the city. I'm in bucket truck number 10, so if you ever see me out there, yeah, you did.
So I got to do this.
So my job primarily comes down to three things. It's storm damage, it's tree removals, and tree pruning. While it's fresh in my memory, the girdling roots, because you just said it with the volcano mulch. What I've seen most common is the mulch holds enough moisture for the roots to start growing into it, but during drought season it all dries out and roots cannot grow into air, so then they have to die back to the tree. So then trees are very opportunistic, so they keep trying to grow and they're expending a lot of energy, and any roots that do take would end up kind of circling in that mulch because they can't grow out of it. So then they end up encircling the tree and kind of girdling it. So it just kind of, girdling is kind of just a strangulation of the main stem of the tree. So then it interferes with the vascular system, so it can't transport nutrients up and all that. But I just wanted to touch on that while it was fresh in my mind. But the coated system, a lot of my work comes down to the coated. It's the compartmentalization of decay in trees. And that's just a nice word for, there's rotten trees, the tree has ways to cordon it off and protect itself. So I have a whole bunch of samples. So now is time for some hands-on. So the first wall is the up and down. The tree's vascular system will plug we'll call them veins. It's the tubes that run inside, up and down, and it plugs them. It's the weakest wall of the four. Feel free to walk that around or however you'd like it. Yeah, but yeah, so it's the weakest wall, and you can see that it traveled down from that cut that's on the side. It traveled down, and because it's the weakest wall, it was able to travel quite far. But while you're looking at it, the second wall is the annual growth rings. The late season wood is more dense, so like the stuff that's growing in fall, even into the very early winter, it slows down, and that's what we call a growth ring. That's what when you look at it, you count, and you can look here and just count the rings. That's really just the difference between early season wood and late season wood. It just slows down and it's much more dense, and that dense wood creates a barrier for pathogens.
Shall I pass everything?
You are welcome to. If you don't want to, feel free to pass it along. The third wall would be inside there on the horizontal, going around the ring. There's things called rays that just kind of block up, so it's not one continuous ring going all the way around. So there's little dividers, and then it'll contain it to that ray, and sometimes it'll breach it, but each ray will slow it down. And then the last wall, which you'll see on a lot of these other ones, is the new growth. The new growth is the strongest. It grows around the decay and puts on new wood, so that it completely seals off the injury and that it can outgrow the wound. So the wound can become the past. So speaking of that, I wanted to stress the importance of making proper cuts. Whether you're doing it on your own trees or what have you. This, unfortunately, I had to make an improper cut to bring this in, but this was on a removal, so it didn't matter. So I did a flush cut because it was a removal, it doesn't matter. But you would want to cut right at the branch bark ridge, or at the collar, because at this swelling point, there's specially designed cells that when you cut this off, they're designed to grow quickly and callus over the wound. So if you were to cut too close, called a flush cut, you're cutting all of those specially designed cells and the tree has to start like it was never there in the first place. Feel free.
They shouldn't cut the street trees.
Yes, you are not supposed to cut the street trees. Those are the city's domain. This is an example of just a tree self-pruning. That is a limb that just died off, and the tree is starting to grow around it. I don't know, is this too many hands on?
No.
Excellent, excellent. So storm damage, that's another big one, especially this last storm. I don't have a percentage, but it just about seemed like a tenth of our trees had to have shed something. And we've been working, like I just had 3 calls today, just still cleaning up the storm. It's been tapering off, but it was definitely all hands on deck for quite some time out there. But that's to go for every storm. There's usually, whenever there's wind, something happens. Now we have topping cuts, and topping cuts I can kind of put in the same category as stub cuts. So this, when you do a stub cut or a topping cut, you've breached all those layers. Every defense layer that it has is now open. So now all it has is hopefully to grow over, but that there's no collar, there's no specially designed cells here to grow over. So it doesn't have a good chance of healing over a stub cut or similar cut to that. Yeah, so the weakest wall is the vertical, the up and down, and that you can see it's just hollowed right into it. And that, yeah, and then that will go into the lion tailing, which I don't have an example of lion tailing, so imagine with me here that this is a whole limb, and you were to cut this, and pretend it keeps going, and you cut all the limbs and just leave the tips. Now you have wounds here, here, and here, so you have the potential for decay all the way through the limb, and now you've left weight out at the end, so now you've maximized your potential for this just snapping in the mildest of winds. But now that I'm holding it, I might as well talk about it now. Emerald ash borer. It's a bad one. We have quite a few ash trees that have been affected by it, and I have some large. I'm not going to pat. This one's kind of heavy.
I'm curious.
Yeah, we can carry that one.
Yeah.
So that is a larger sample, but the tree's healed over it. And yeah, it's that one, and there should be, so all of these are feeding damage, but because it's already been healing over, you can almost, I describe it as almost like a lava rolling over the sides. That's the damage, and I would say that's probably 3 years ago.
Is that just for ash trees?
That particular damage, yes. There are other insects that do similar damage to other trees. But not that we're really struggling with here in Quincy, at least that I'm aware of. Sure.
The ash trees around the city, if you see holes, those are the only trees that you guys are definitely just picking out. Is that
Not
correct?
necessarily.
Okay.
So we have one pocket we're working on, and it seems like we're having good success. It almost was a monoculture, meaning we had almost like one type of tree. Not exclusively, there were a couple other scattered trees in there, but it was mostly ash trees. And we've taken out the most infested and left the ones that seemed like they were fairly resistant. And we're seeing good results that maybe those ones can stay, because if all the food's not all in one spot, the population might dwindle. Okay.
So I had Emerald last quarter, I wanted my beautiful trees.
Sure.
Are you treating the trees with anything? 'Cause
We
they
are-
They should have done that earlier.
So, the cost to, maybe I'm speaking out of turn because this is more procedural, this is more Mike's side, but the cost to treat each tree is so extensive.
It's also so prevalent and ubiquitous at this point, there's really no preventing it.
So you're just gonna take them out?
So
We're trying-
when they become a danger or hazard, we will take them out. We don't
But
try
in the meantime, we are trying to thin the food source, because if there's, picture 3 ash trees all in a row, there's a buffet.
Yes.
We need to just, here's one. That goes to Mike's 30, 20, 10. You want to make sure you're keeping your species kind of scattered around so the food source is not just there for one
He came right
region.
back the next day, took the huge tree out, cut it all up, took it away, and weren't those darn bugs sitting there on the stump?
Were they?
So, yeah. I
But there was no
couldn't
food source for them.
believe it.
Yeah.
I mean, what I didn't realize is that a branch was dying, but the tree was sending up all new sapling branches because it was trying to survive. It was fascinating. Once we
Next.
knew what was going on.
I have an example of
I
that.
felt so sad.
So that is what, those are water sprouts.
Yeah.
Those are very poorly attached to the tree, and they grow vigorously, but if you can see here, they never attach well. So they can break off in highway, like, this was a utility cut when, I don't know, we'll say 20 years ago. They had to clear the lines, so this was an old topping cut. And then 3 water sprouts came out, and I had to trim it because it was getting too close to the primaries. But they'll never have good attachment, and it's just so high risk for being near wires, near driveways, near houses. So we have to come in and clean up all those cuts. Thank you for that question, though. Yes, the black knot. Okay, well, yes, girdling. Black knot, I am not going to pass this around, hence why it's in a baggie. It's a very infectious fungus, just for trees, not for people.
certain types of trees do.
Yeah, certain types of trees, cherries and plums, is that correct?
Yes.
Yes. It's a 2-year cycle fungus. It takes 2 years to fully develop. The first year it starts as like a small green, like swelling in the bark, and then it overwinters as that, not a danger yet. So you have time to prune it, but the next year it grows, swells larger, and then it overwinters, and it turns into this,
Not.
yeah, it turns into a rough knot, and then in the rain in the spring, the raindrops disperse the fungus to everywhere around it. And every year after that, it will grow longer and longer, but it takes those 2 years for it to fully form into a spreadable fungus. And eventually it will end up girdling, it will eat away at that cambium layer all the way around the limb. And not unlike, I know I held this up for deer earlier, but it's the same effect. This is rabbits. Where we dump chips, we had snow. And you can see that the snow was here. Actually, it was up to here. This is where they started feeding, but you can see the snow was melting, and they fed all the way down. But now the ground is open, and they have some more food to choose from. But I chose this one specifically because this has last year's bunny feeding, because we didn't have as much snow, but it's a lot lower. I just thought that was more of an interesting. I don't know if you want to pass that around. It's an interesting one. The black knot, if
That's right.
Yeah, you can prune it. What's that?
You can prune it.
Yeah, you can prune the black knot. You can also spray the black knot. But there are some infestations that are so heavy that I've seen some that are so overwhelming that I don't know what you would actually do to salvage the tree, short of maybe more resistant cultivar of that. I don't know if you would agree with that statement.
I mostly see black knot on that one variety of trees called the Canada Red Select Cherry. We put about 10 species of them out, 10 trees of them out of that species, and I went back in about 2 years as I do my assessments, and I noticed that 3 of the 10 were pretty heavily invested, so it's something I don't plant now as much because I'm cognizant it could spread.
Yeah. All right. Next. Perfect. Okay. I remember when we were clearing the pathway up at Pageant, this is specifically where this came up, we had circling vines, bittersweet vines. Personally, I think they look super cool. They are devastating for the trees that they are growing up. Side note, I saw a guy that was making some really cool walking sticks out of those encircling vines. I thought that was just a cool side note. Anyway, we get tons of well, not tons of it, some vandalism, but accidents into trees is an unfortunate consequence of, sometimes it happens near intersections. This was a accident that happened on a tree, and it started healing over, but it was just not able to overcome the wound, and the tree did inevitably die. So it tried its best, but it didn't quite have enough energy stored to be able to overcome the damage that was done. This was all one. It was like a 14-inch tree, so I tried my best to dice it down, and I cut it too thin.
So.
Yeah, so that was all one, but I think
Oh, and then here. it's-
yeah. You could actually just pass
Yeah.
just that one. It's all the same. And then limbs from tall truck, limbs getting struck from tall trucks. I have seen this 3 times. I've been here a while, but it does happen. It's never ideal. Three times where the tree failed on the impact. It was the truck was stuck there, the tree was damaged, the tree uprooted, or the one side of the tree had already failed off and was stuck on the truck. But that is what we try to get out there. We try to get the clearance on the trees so that even if that tractor trailer is hugging that curb right on the edge, that they do have the clearance. So that's a lot of what I'm doing out there, is getting the road clearances, getting the sidewalk clearances, making sure all the cuts are properly made, making sure that the coated system can effectively compartmentalize everything. And oh yeah, so that's the bunnies, the girdling roots. The girdling roots, I particularly say this about Norway maples because that's where I see it the most. It's the funny contrast between Mike Casanelli and myself, because he focuses at the very beginning, and then I see like the middle and end. So the harder he works, the more routine my job becomes, which I like that. So good job. Very good team. But often while I'm out there, I do see weed whacker damage, whether it's intentional or that I would put that under vandalism. But whether it's intentional, maybe they didn't want the tree, they didn't like the location, or never wanted one in the first place. I don't know. But
They may have not been educated on it.
yeah, correct. Yeah. And that's why we're here, the education part. And but we like to put some tree protection up when we can. You can put like for bunnies, they have like it's almost like a mesh that goes around the base of the stem that would prevent that feeding that just goes up while there's snow on the ground. And there's just so many things that can grow on a tree. I've seen clotheslines put on trees that strangle it off, dog runs.
Christmas lights?
Yeah, Christmas lights. I didn't want to take it down this year. And
Some people leave them up, they have little solar powered ones that are on their tree, and they've left it for maybe 5-10 years, and you'll start to see the tree growing around the lights.
Yeah.
Sure.
And every year you see those lights get a little tighter and a little tighter, and eventually it'll get too tight, and the tree starts to try to go around it, and it's got to completely encircle whatever it's growing around. And if it's small, sometimes it can manage that, but sometimes it can't.
Poison ivy's a big girdler.
Oh yeah, yep.
When I have a shout out to Dave Barnard, he saved a lot of trees up at Forbes Hill. Poison ivy grows pretty quick, and it's everywhere, and with 20,000 street trees in the city, and there's a lot of things that we have to manage, and a resident and partner in the community, such as Dave, has really been supportive. So thank you.
So I grew up on a small sugar maple farm, a more hobby farm. So I inherit, I have to say sugar maple, I have to. But my favorite tree in Quincy, specifically, there is a sycamore at the Adams Shore Library. It is enormous and it is beautiful. I highly recommend checking it out. It is a fine specimen. Yeah.
All right, you guys hear me? So I'm going to talk a little bit about choosing a tree for your yard. I didn't get too into specific species a little bit, but more just about like how you even go about decision making, which is always a challenge for me. I am a landscape architect, but I work at an environmental engineering firm. I work on a lot of like green stormwater infrastructure projects, things like that, and so less residential. And my way of landscaping my own personal yard, which I'll get into a little bit, is a little less planned, a little more about strategic management of what's there. So, but I thought I'd start off with just talking about what are some of these steps. And some of the steps in making the decision are a lot of the same steps that Mike takes when he is choosing what trees he's going to plant in the right spot around the city. Some of these things are the same that you need to consider for your yard, right? So the site analysis slides I'm going to talk about, a big thing is just about making observations. You know, sometimes people, they want to plant a tree, so you just go out to a nursery and you pick a cute tree, you know, a beautiful tree, and stick it in. But I think there's a lot of benefit to just taking a moment and trying to make a few observations about what's going on in your yard and neighborhood before you make the choice, right? So one of the things is soils and drainage. This picture on the right is actually a picture of a friend's backyard where there's an underground river. And when it rains, the groundwater rises. And these 3 trees were DCR planted back when they had the Gateway Cities free tree planting program, which was awesome. And they did a really great job choosing trees that would thrive in a yard that obviously floods. So we've got some bald cypress, the cherry that you were talking about that gets black knot, and also some tupelo in there, but they're loving it. So sometimes, even though you might not be thrilled that you have to pump out your basement, you know, you can plant some really cool trees if you just embrace the groundwater. On the other side, of course, there can be really sandy soils, dry soils that lack a lot of nutrients. Now, these are just things that you need to consider in terms of choosing species. There's species, native and not native, that you're going to be able to find for any of these conditions. So, but just being aware, right? Salt. my touch up salt too, it's the same thing in your yard. You know, Quincy's a coastal city. Some people might get, you know, ocean salt spray in their yard, but there's also just the salt that you're putting down on pathways, on the sidewalk in front of your house. So just considering the like higher tolerance for those urban conditions that trees might need when they're close to your pathways that are gonna receive salt in the winter. And then you can also, if you're really curious, you know, you can try and find out what kind of soil you have by doing like a manual hand test. So find out if it's more sandy, more clayey. You can just Google, you know, soil texture test online and see how to do a ribbon test. Or if you're really curious, you can send in a soil sample to like UMass Amherst and they'll give you a whole rate analysis about it. But these are things that good to know when you go into that nursery. You can talk to people about your soil conditions and what trees would be appropriate. So additional observations to make would be, of course, sun and shade, but then also the intensity of the sun and shade. Is it deep shade? Is the sun, do you have a south-facing white house where there's a place you can plant a tree that's going to get all the reflected heat off of that white surface, and it creates this microclimate where maybe the hardiness zone, like it, you know, it's a different zone than everywhere else in your yard, right? So that can be fun to really kind of look for microclimates in your yard and experiment a little bit with different types of trees. Hardiness zone maps, there's the USDA, Department of Agriculture comes out with hardiness zone maps. Their most recent one was from 2023. There's also Arbor Day. And this screenshot here on the bottom left shows the Arbor Day one. And so it, you know, you can look for trees for your hardiness zones, but I think it's interesting because that last map, right, it changed, climate change. And so the zones shifted quite a bit in that new map release, but then also when you look at Quincy, it's cool because you can see how we're a coastal city, right? And you can see that line, that hardiness zone line, where the conditions on the coast are gonna provide the opportunity to plant plants that are for warmer climates than inland. Right? There's also space constraints, just like what Mike was talking about, but just on a more personal backyard level, like this little oak tree in my yard, which is a volunteer, which is great, but it's like 2 feet from the garage, you know? So now I'm having a moment where I'm like, all right, do we, like, while it's still cold out, try and transplant it to a place where it's not gonna cause a bunch of issues when it gets bigger. So just thinking about, especially when you're gonna buy a plant and plant it in a particular location, don't just think about the size it is when you put it in the ground. Of course, think about its mature size and the effects that could have. So also we've been talking a lot about insects and diseases and pests and things, and I do think it's great to, you know, observe in your yard and in your neighborhood if you can see what there might be, you know, like probably don't want to plant an ash tree. You know, think about black knot. Are you willing to do the maintenance on a tree that might get black knot? Are you gonna take those pruners and are you gonna like clean them so that if you do one cut, you don't spread it to the next tree with another cut, right? Like, are you gonna put in that effort? So knowing what diseases might be or funguses and things might be in your area is a consideration to make. And we'll talk about rabbits in a minute. We've been talking about rabbits. We could talk about rabbits this whole time. So I would also just say, you know, like, learning about the trees that are around you. So I love, even in my yard, I've lived there now 16 years, but there's always like new things popping up. Trying to identify what wants to grow in the yard and what is thriving in your neighborhood is a great way to see, you know, all right, these plants seem to be doing really well, maybe I should consider these to plant in my yard. And there's any number of apps these days to help you identify plants and trees, and they're getting better and better. And, I really like using like iNaturalist, which also then you can see all the other observations that people in the city or wherever you are have made and see what other plants and things are growing in your neighborhood. And you're also kind of, if you submit it, you're kind of helping citizen scientists to know what's growing in your neighborhood. So check it out, but that's a great way to just understand what you've got. So getting into goals and what you can give. So this is like another kind of question you can ask yourself back to like the my pruning comments. Are you willing to prune out the black knot? I personally had that. So I have, well, I'm going to talk about this in a minute, but like cedar apple rust and these other things. Like, are you willing to plant a service berry if you know it's probably going to get cedar apple rust? I'm jumping ahead of myself. What are your goals? So you want to plant a tree, you love trees, but what are the other things that you are asking, this tree to do? Because that's what we're doing when we're planting a tree, right? Because we're humans. Are we planting it because we want to provide like a big canopy for shade? Do we want to have it be great for wildlife habitat, increase diversity in the neighborhood? Do we want it to be something that's big or evergreen to screen, ourselves or other people or what have you? Do you want it to be edible? And this is great. This is the fig on the far left. That's a picture of Heather's figs. And you can get a little cutting of one of those figs and bring it home and have these gorgeous figs if you want. Or do you want it to be fast growing? Do you want it to have curb appeal, or do you want it to be like a specimen, like this is a black gum, Tupelo. And it can serve many purposes, but it's also a lovely specimen. These are Amelanchier flowers, serviceberry flowers on the far right. So again, just ask yourself, what is it that you really want out of this tree, or what do you want to give the environment around you by choosing these specific species for that place, right? So again, being realistic about expectations. One of the things is just like, how big of a tree should I get? That's a big question because it's about money and logistics and time and all this, but also there's trade-offs to choosing it. There's the logistics of, can you dig a hole big enough to put the thing in the ground, And so the picture in the middle here is from us planting one of the relatively small serviceberry trees as part of the QTA tree planting this last spring, and knowing your soils, digging that hole. This is not a big root ball. It was much harder than we all anticipated.
And the students anticipated.
And the students
And we
anticipated.
also thank the Boston Garden Club for helping us out with that.
Yes.
Thank you.
So, knowing what your soils are like and sticking a shovel in the ground first before you buy a big balled and burlapped container tree, or is someone else going to plant it for you? These are things to think about. Also, there's benefits to planting smaller trees because they are going to adapt better, faster in the conditions you're planting them in. And then versus a bigger tree where you're going to get that impact right away, but it's going to need a lot more TLC during that establishment period to survive. So continuing with like maintenance and care, right? So you need to also make sure, just like with the city, they're contracted to water for that first growing season, right? For like most of the year. And you need to also recognize that you're gonna need to water. So thinking about how are you doing that? Are you gonna just hand water? Are you gonna go away for the hottest weeks of the summer for a week or two? That could be the end of your new tree. So just thinking about, are you gonna put it on a timer with drip irrigation, and just what can you give to this new tree that you just planted? And then we've been talking about girdling and rabbits, and this is a picture of the base of my pear tree this winter, which I did not get the hardware cloth and put it around the tree until it was the bark's half gone. So we'll see what happens. But, I think it's important just to, you're in it together. You plant that tree and, you're growing together. Some other, pests and diseases and things to consider, I had mentioned before, cedar apple rust is in the picture on the top. I have that in my yard on my cedars. It's rust where you need both hosts. So you need the juniper trees, which is northern red cedar, and you need apple, which could be a crab apple. It can also be a service berry because they're related. So if you have both those, you might get this really hard rust that kind of hides, and then in the spring explodes orange gooey ornaments all over your juniper tree. It's kind of cool. It's kind of cool. And so, everyone has their preferences about whether they mind things like this too. But this is kind of starting to get into selective management. Do you prune out some of the other host trees, try and make it so that one can survive better over the other, or do you just live with it because it's not harming it and to the point of that it's going to kill it, So there's a lot of things that can happen with different species of trees. We've talked about this. And so what you can do is just look for resistance when you're selecting the plants. That's, picking the species that might be more resistant, or you can choose cultivars that show resistance to specific types of pests and diseases. And at the nursery, I recommend just looking really closely at the leaves in the soil at the base of the tree and just making sure there's nothing that you're going to bring home with you. Yeah. That was enough. Yeah. So I just wanted to touch on native trees. I think probably everyone in this room kind of knows or talked about or heard about native trees and why you might want to plant native trees. So native trees, they are native because they evolved in a region before large scale human movement, right? Where there was impact because humans moved plants and things around. Because they also evolved in those areas with the wildlife that evolved with them, right? So they grew in that soil, in that climate, with those caterpillars and birds and everything all together. So the native trees continue to support those native ecologies. You might have heard of something called ecotypes. There are some nurseries in the area that will have ecotypes plants, and so those are plants that they know the location that the seed was collected and grown from. So those are kind of hyper-local particular plants that you can find, and you might want to choose those because they are likely the most adept at growing in those local conditions, right? They've evolved to grow exactly in that spot, and if you live close to that spot, it'll probably do well and thrive. Also, just generally, understanding how nurseries work a little bit. Some nurseries, they're growing stuff from seed. Other nurseries are getting small whips or plugs from other nurseries and then growing them out. And some nurseries are really getting stuff shipped from either closer by or down in New Jersey or further south. So you have to decide for yourself how you feel about those choices and where those plants grew from. They're of course going to be more likely to adapt to your yard if they spent their lives living and growing here. And then also there's certain nurseries that use things like neonicotinoids when they're growing out their plants, which is a systemic insecticide which can you can have issues with pollinators, like for the life of that tree or of those, especially with like flowers and things like that. So it's important to kind of educate yourself, but not to try and ask good questions when you go to the nurseries, about what you want. So of course, native trees, it's touching on these topics that are very big, and we can kind of get into these in the Q&A too, but diversity, climate change, what trees are used to thrive here aren't necessarily thriving anymore, like the sugar maples, unfortunately, right? Like they're kind of moving north. And because of climate change, there's a lot of stressors. So like, it's a wet site, it's a dry site, but now it's like, can it withstand flooding and inundation on a regular basis? Can it tolerate drought for extended periods of time? Everything's a little more intense. So thinking about that, and looking at resources that kind of help us make decisions for choosing trees that are likely going to survive for 100 years and maybe not just for 40 or so and then kind of peter out. And I just wanted to touch a little bit on the Homegrown National Park. A lot of you might have heard about that, spearheaded by Doug Talmy, the author, but it's just in general the idea of planting in your yards, right? Planting millions of small plantings all over can collectively rebuild habitat that's been lost, especially in our urban areas, but really everywhere. And then just touching on what is a cultivar. So we've talked about cultivars a little bit. So a cultivar is a cultivated variety. It's a plant that people have chosen to propagate for a specific trait. And those traits might be disease resistance, but they also might be because they've got beautiful foliage or pretty flowers, or because they stay a compact size for their lifespan. And so it can be, if you have a tight space in an urban environment, like with sight lines around streets, things like that, being able to choose a plant that will kind of fit in a space is important. So cultivars are great for that because you know what you're going to get. Because of they're usually reproduced clonally, it just means that everything is genetically identical. So it's kind of the opposite of planting for diversity. So it's just another tool in the toolbox, right? And so these pictures real quick, if you're at the nursery, and we've been talking, like Mike was talking about the 2010, Nyssa sylvatica on that tree tag, right? The Nyssa is the genus, the sylvatica is the species, and wildfire is the cultivar. And then these on the right are the, so Mike, actually, you showed two of the sweet gums, right? One's the straight species planted at Forbes, and then the other is
Happy Days,
which is the candy corn tree. And then these are Slender Silhouette, and it's the same genus and species. These are just different cultivars of the same tree, and that's how they grow.
They're typically grafted in the nurseries too.
Yeah, that's true with those. I'll talk about grafting in a sec too. I'm talking a lot. All right, I'm gonna go quick. All right, so living with your choices. This is just kind of a slide to talk about how there's like an abundance of things growing in your yard, right? So you decide what you're removing and what you're not removing. So these are kind of like before and after pictures of when I first moved in to our house in Quincy about 16 years ago. And on the left, you can't even see it, is the same juniper that's beneath it now, which is like as tall as our house. And then on the right is this black cherry tree. And then now it's towering above our house. Both native species, both volunteers. The black cherry had been like top cut over and over again too. And so, of course, naturally it's a multi-stem tree now, but it's doing well. So I think my point with just showing these and like talking about kind of what trees are in my yard is it's just another moment to like make observations, look a little closer, what's in your yard, and identify it, and then maybe just let it grow and see what happens. And in 10 years, it could be, you know, a towering tree in your yard. And then these are just some pretty pictures of trees in my yard. This is staghorn sumac, which are, they spread, they're rhizomatic, and so they kind of create these colonies with this lovely tropical foliage. And then you can also make sumac-ade out of the berries from the fruit. This is something that like kind of can look a little bit weedy, but again, like realizing it's a native, understanding how it grows and how like maybe I can keep it from going into neighbors who might not want it, but it's this beautiful plant, and so like kind of making the most of what you've got, right? Making sumac-ade with the weedy plant can be really fun. And then speaking of grafting, I bought some witch hazel that are this cultivar Yelena, kind of like the Arnold's Promise witch hazel. It's another cultivar. It's actually a hybrid of Japanese and Chinese witch hazels, and but they're typically grafted on the native witch hazel rootstock. And so when the native rootstock started to sprout, I was like, well, like, so typically you're supposed to prune them out, so you just keep the Gelena cultivar and it's doing what it's supposed to do, which is the blooms on the left, and it's blooming now. But I let those native sprouts keep going, and they're the leaves that aren't as red and orange. And now I also have yellow blooms from the native witch hazel that bloom in like the late fall, in like October. So science in your yards, you know, but it's kind of cool just to like learn and understand a little bit about all the different witch hazels and about how they created this witch hazel just by making those observations. These are just a few other, you know, paper bark maple, fringe tree, which is native a little further south, and paper birch, which is a native, you know, just sharing pretty pictures. And then these are just kind of a slew of resources. First being Mike. I just wanted to throw these all up here, but it's really important, you know, like to have these. This information is also on the city's website and the Quincy Tree Alliance website. But as Mike mentioned before, if you want a tree in front of your house, contact him. So we put up his, and we put up Dan Cathcart's email address too. He's the tree warden. And then I just wanted to throw up a bunch of resources to, you know, there's a lot of great websites where have search engine tools for you to put in kind of what you're looking for, see what it comes up with, and learn a lot from. So, yeah, I just talked a lot. Thank you.
Put into it with all the storm and everything else happening, so thank you.
But what questions do you have now? What can we start with? Yes, go ahead.
In Princess says that beside City Hall,
Yes.
it was like garden with Japanese cherries. This was so beautiful. And we have in Adam Street beautiful cherry tree too. And now they cut down everything. Why? And would you like to plant tree with flowers?
I'm sorry, I didn't quite understand.
So there have been some trees that have been cut down, and
Cherry
particular
trees.
cherry
Beside
trees.
City Hall, it was entire area, like garden, cherry trees.
I'm not exactly sure. The city doesn't remove things unless they absolutely need to be removed, trees need to be removed.
Are you referring to Elm Ave by any chance?
Where?
Cherry trees.
But which street is it on?
North Clinton.
Beside City Hall, beside,
City Hall.
was it close to subway, and for this was church, when we have now.
Oh, maybe when was it a while ago when they put in the paving?
It's before, but it's not.
Before that,
Okay.
at City Hall.
I'm not totally
Yeah.
sure. I might not have been here when that happened. Sometimes when production, when we're gonna install a building and something like that, we see, areas where the larger goal, where having a building or structure, things do have to be removed, but they are replaced to an extent. We do make up for it in other areas. So I'm not totally sure of the area that
And
you're.
what in Adam Street, there was a lot of cherry trees, which was cut down and do not replaced anything, and it's,
We'll have
If
to, we'll have to
you'd
look
like
into
to-
that.
Yeah, if you'd like to send me an email with some details, I'll look into it and get back to you.
Did it happen a long time ago or recently?
no, like 2 years ago.
Can I do a follow-up on that? Just, if we're in the same neighborhood, this is in North Quincy. Are we, I'm trying to think, the only reference point I have is there's the laundromat, which I spent a lot of time at. And it's across from where H&R Block is. You go further down, you get to Eastern Nazarenes. I'm not great on street names. Are we in the same? So anyway, there was a whole row of
I believe you're
trees.
talking about Elm Ave,
Yes.
right off of Hancock
Are we in the
Street.
same neighborhood?
So,
Those were every spring, there was this glorious
So I-
celebration of pink. It was like, the little mini cherry blossom festival. And then they were all gone. Now, I don't know if that had to do with the fact that they were restructuring the road, but then new trees were planted in. But I'm sorry, these new trees just do not have the same pizzazz.
sure, I understand. So I know those cherry, that was before I was officially an arborist with the city. I got my arborist certification about 3 years ago, so it was like, right, I just missed it, so it's
No,
not.
but that was, am I in the right? Those trees were gorgeous.
Yes, they were, but I know I'm pretty sure Kwanzai cherry trees is what they
Yes.
were. They traditionally, at that age, have such poor attachments, where the risk, once you've done infrastructure improvements, which I know that's what
Right.
they did, they did so many improvements under that road,
Right.
that when they dug up, I don't know the specifics as to why they wouldn't replant. I mean, I know
Yeah, it could be
they want more
factors,
diversity.
changing the grades, infrastructure, adding and changing infrastructure are all factors that could have been in play here.
Yeah, and given the soil amendments that they had to add on to whatever infrastructure improvements they put down there, might not have been conducive to having a cherry grow there.
Sure.
Because I believe they're elms. Yeah, okay, I'm trying to picture it in my head right now. I'm pretty sure they're elms down that
If
strip.
anybody has some photographs of it, but it was absolutely spectacular.
Yes, it was.
The elms are gonna be way better anyway.
Somebody else.
Street.
Anyone else? Let's see, so.
So, don't think about street trees, but the ones that you're planting in parks where you have a lot of options, what percentage of those would you say that you plant are native, non-cultivars versus the cultivars and introduced species from other parts of the world?
A very large percent. I don't have an exact
A little bit
percent.
if we can.
Yeah, so
Answer.
with the heritage parks, for example, that we're putting a lot of native trees in. You'll see a lot of really cool scarlet oaks, shingle oak. So there's a lot more play. You'll see evergreen screens, things that we can't put on the street. Not just for branching or visibility issues. It really is. It's kind of a juxtaposition idea. You have to look at each area and figure out what works best. The trees, there's a lot more opportunities at the parks where we can put a lot more of these native trees in. Evergreens, even there's a black willow, which we wouldn't see on the. A black willow is a native willow tree that we have up at Forest Hill. So there's a lot more opportunity at parks and playgrounds and open spaces than there are along streets. So it's a much higher percentage of native trees. There is a good percent of native trees in our street tree planting. It's just not as high as in the park settings.
Do you have any idea about how high it is in the parks?
In the parks, it's
Yeah.
probably around 70% or so, I would say, because a lot of it also is these native, free trees that have kind of grown naturally and that we
Yeah.
just pruned up and have saved. White pine's another one that you'll see, for example, that you'll see. Yes.
Because like Homegrown National Park, like Doug Townley, like the best tree you could plant for, biological diversity, is oak trees.
It is.
And it's
Yeah.
very hard for you to put one in your own yard because they just like grow so big, so.
Right.
So the
It's
more
the
that you
same
can
as the
put
street.
like oak trees, like the miracle tree,
Yes.
in the parks, that'd be great.
Yes, absolutely. It's something that we have been actively doing, is putting a lot of native trees. It's beneficial for the wildlife. There's a lot of benefits with them, not just like beautification, but we have a lot more play with the parks than the street trees. Well, the other thing is like food production, acorns, it's not just the size of the trunk of the tree that will live with the sidewalks, but you also have to take into play the, branch shedding. Oaks like to shed some branches, they like to drop acorns. It's not something that you want to see on the street so much. So there are areas that they work. Has to be a wide border. It's all case by case basis.
Yes, go ahead.
I was just wondering if Quincy had a source for trees and other plants that they put in that doesn't use systemic and insecticides, no neonicotinoids.
I would defer to Dan Kafka on the systemic insecticides.
It's a resource for your plants that is organic, so that you're not buying and planting plants that already have
So we choose.
insecticides built in.
Right, so we choose, disease-resistant trees, pest-resistant trees for the most part. So
I'm not.
Are you asking for a place to get?
No, I wasn't. I'm not belittling what you do at all. I think what you do is fabulous.
I believe you're asking, do we use a nursery that certifies that we don't use neonicotinoids and
What I
other
was asking
insecticides?
is, have you actually been able to locate one that will provide things like that? Because I don't think that's very easy.
It's not very easy. It's not. No one wants to wear that one very openly.
Right. That's what I thought. Okay.
Good question.
I think it would be great if cities would promote that with the people that they buy from.
Good point, good point.
Thank you.
Someone else? Yes, go ahead.
I've been concerned about the beech trees on the lawn of Tom Springs. I had a conversation a few years ago with the director, because I would see kids pulling down, I worry that they'd get hurt and they seem to be injuring the tree limbs. And now, a couple of them are horrible, they're right on the ground. Are they on track to get pruned or something?
we have done some proactive pruning with them, and the thing is, you're seeing that they are kind of at the end stages of life. You're seeing a lot of dieback. There is included bark. There's also beech leaf disease that's out there, and it's systemic.
I would like to piggyback real quick. There is a really cool feature that's happening on that tree that generally you only see in an old growth forest. It's very uncommon to see in a landscape like this. The tree is currently layering. It is asexual reproduction of the tree. It is laid a branch down and it has rooted. So it's interesting. So there's going to be if it were to stay, I have no idea, but there will be a secondary tree taking off like this from the base. Just an interesting tidbit. It has layered, which is just a kind of cool fact.
That's good.
So
It's a cool fact. It's neither good nor bad. It's just happening.
So it's essentially creating roots. The branch that's drooping, it's touching the soil, and it's now essentially the cells in it have said, oh, we're back in the soil, let's create some roots down here.
It's good in terms of if we'd like to keep the same genetic material of that tree. If that tree were to fade, we would have a genetic replication of it right next to it. Just a fun fact.
Is that an Olmsted
It's like
tree?
natural propagation,
Yeah.
essentially. It's like air.
Well, funny you should ask how old it is, because we are partnering, PTA is partnering with the library for a program in April And we've identified all the trees that are out there, and we're gonna try to say about how old they are, because there's gonna be a birthday party for Olmsted. So please join us. April 25th, is that right? I think. It's a Saturday.
I have a
Yes.
question.
Emily?
Yeah, Michael, I see you really working hard. We are so pleased in the city to have you and our arborists. Thank you so much for being on board.
Thank you.
It's very important. Now, I am interested in some of the invasives we have. I know you no longer plant the Norway maple.
Right.
And there's a Chinese sumac. I see it growing a lot everywhere. Do you have any plans to remove them? I just recently learned from Trevor Smith, who he was our speaker at the Wallaston Garden. You maybe know Trevor Smith. He works for Western Nurseries. And he said this Chinese sumac, the Alianthus, is a host plant for spotted lantern fly. And therefore they should be removed because they are so invasive. So is the city doing anything about it?
Absolutely. So Mayor Tom Cope and Dave Murphy have started an invasive species committee. Heather List, the environmental science and I have been working actively with residents and groups to combat some of this. The thing is, there's a lot of invasive species out there.
Yes.
And one area that we could use some help is from the residents on combating these invasive species. That Dave Potter has done some incredible impacts up at Forbes Hill, because there's always things that are growing in. You know, as the birds will eat the seeds and spread them around, or they might come from a container someone planted, and they'll always be kind of spreading around. So we have to actively work at removing these. It's kind of a losing battle, because it's something that we're doing, but we always love to maintain.
If I call your office, could you go and cut them down, or what do you?
I would have to see the site and
Are you referring to
inspect it. You please put the request in. If you send me an email, I'd be happy to help you.
Are you referring to private or public property?
I believe it's gonna be public.
It's say on Carson Street, it's,
Oh, okay.
it's
I
on
just
the
wanted to
street.
clarify. Sure.
Yeah, it's in the back of the church, and they are horrible.
So send him an email, so that he'll be on that. I think we have time, I want to be respectful of everybody's time. I see two more people with hands up. Go ahead. Yes. Thank you.
So if a homeowner hires a tree contractor, and has the contractor cut a street tree,
That is not allowed unless there is written consent from the
Right.
Department of Natural Resource Commissioner or the tree warden.
But what happened? So that happened on my street. They just chopped off the tree. So there's they took half the canopy off and it's just flat.
What I would do is, number one, if you see a contractor out there, try to, that's
Yeah.
essentially not a city, that's not a city contractor. Take pictures, either call the police to try to stop them, and make sure they have a permit. Call the tree warden, call the city, and
And so what, could they could be fined?
Yes.
And how often does that happen, and who makes that happen?
the tree warden.
The tree warden?
Thank you. Yes. go
Yeah,
ahead.
this is, I think, quick.
Yes.
I think you have a slide that you showed the types of trees that you planted at the heritage, the new heritage parks in the city.
Oh, yeah.
Can you put that back up? I just wanted to look at which, take a photo and see the trees are in the different parks.
It's a really cool project that we've been working on throughout the city. So we've created, 4 new heritage parks. There's going to be, I'm working with Bob Damon, he's the historical director, and we're tying it into the history of the sites as well. So I'm not going to get too much into it on that basis, because there's more to come. This is an incredible park, Lincoln Granite, you'll see right there, right next to the highway. There was a lot of native trees, a lot of evergreen, and very, one of probably my favorite tree there is the tupelo. See what else we got. There's all unique trees here. There's some that you'll see that aren't native, but for the most part, I was trying to match the best tree with that site, also tying it to historical relevance, and sometimes it was just, in some locations, it was more of a different species for diversity as well. So those are different aspects, it depends on the site and the location. Is there any specific questions that you had about?
No, I just
Oh, you wanted to see that?
I just wanted to see the list of the species.
Okay.
Dave, comment?
Yeah, I would just like to say that over the past year, what DNR and Murphy might have done is just incredible around the city. I think like 500 trees planted, and these new pocket parks have massive trees going into them. For instance, I don't know, by the Sly Fox, you put an oak tree, I think?
Yeah, at West Street and Center Street, there's a little pocket park. That is a scarlet oak tree, I think.
I mean, it's probably
Yeah.
a 20-foot tree that put in there.
Yeah, so we went with the caliper, we were measuring, I tagged those at Elhannon Nurseries. Myself, they were 8-inch caliper trees. And they all vary from 6-inch to 8-inch caliper trees. I, selected them on various factors. So, you go to a nursery and there's a lot to choose from, and I try to choose the best one for each park. So that's why you might see some fluctuation in size, but I'm looking at the actual specimen of the tree.
The mayor met with QTA about these pocket parks a couple of years ago, and it's nice to see them come to fruition. The other place, the Burke, down by Spruce Park,
Yes.
the old Burke site, we also put a large tree in there. So.
Yes. Yeah, and there's, that one is gonna be, starting back up again. We're about halfway through with it. We had stopped during the winter, and now we're going to, start back up in the spring, and it should be, done by.
Which park is the picture?
That is Lincoln Granite. So that's what we call it. It's at the end of, Center Street, right across from the BJ's, next to the old car wash. So it is a perfect spot for this park because, having any production there would really, bog down that intersection, or, and I can't imagine anybody want to live in an apartment right next to a highway like that. So I think this was a great purchase from the city, and it's another way to show that, how much we love our open spaces and parks and trees.
Yeah, and check out Floats Hill Park. A number of trees have to be cut down when they did the building of the clubhouse up there, but 30 trees were planted over the past summer up there. So
Lots and lots of things to see around. We are going to close because otherwise we'll be kicked out of the library. But what I've gained from this is how much you all love trees and love your jobs. And we thank you so much